I have good news. No, I have news. There's news. When it comes to life, suffering is inevitable. Hopefully this notion will immediately set us free from resisting and restricting and fleeing from the inevitable suffering. Suffering is a natural part of the human experience. It is one end of the parameter between happiness and suffering, or misery and ecstasy, we might say in extreme. And the avoidance of suffering, by which we might describe the pursuit of pleasure, is an undertaking that cannot fail but keep a person removed from the vitality of life, the vitality of the human experience, and knowing the fullest riches of the human waltz. That's not to make glib of suffering, of course. One way in which we'll all know suffering, the majority of us will know suffering, is death. We will all die one day. Yeah, I know it's challenging. And death and dying becomes the largest and most important question in the end, as has been said elsewhere. Once we learn how to do life well, we can begin to embrace dying well. And there is such a thing. There is being conscious of the movement in our autumn years, or even in younger life, of becoming nobody, having spent much of our lengthening or very short life trying to be somebody. But it's a suffering none of us will be able to escape. Yet in the human being's search for meaning, we search for pleasure. We do so by trying to avoid experiences of suffering. Yet are we not all struck by the demise of relationships, of the roles that we thought we had in life? Do we not all come to the end of jobs or seasons? Each day reminds us that seasonal changes are necessary, that as darkness descends, as the night of the day descends and the light reduces, though they both remain part of the whole, that is of the day, so too do years move through seasonal changes from similar ecstatic sunshine to dark and short days of winter and the restriction and retraction of life as we understand it. And of course, nature abhors a vacuum. We must enter into periods, seasons, and the tolerance towards shadow when it emerges, towards darkness and towards constriction and contraction, so that we can sit in that winter of our way, the winter of our day, the literal winter, or just periods of difficulty, sometimes tragedy, misery, depression, that isn't clinical, in order to stay there long enough, but hopefully not have to endure for too long, in order that we might catch the lesson that the winter of the way is offering us. Everything is a teacher, everything be a teacher. Everything is giving a dynamic outpouring of learning, an invitation to decipher meaning from even the most difficult of experiences. And to not do so is to miss out on the human game, is to miss out on the moves to the dance, of which we are the dancer and the architect, is to not allow life to bring us to the fullness of our very being. And don't we know, if we're around people that are so resistant to suffering, that we become enslaved, trapped in experiences and unfinished business and hurt and suffering. And we continue to transmit that difficulty out into the lives of those we care about, those that we don't care about, as we transmit our brokenness and unfinished business in a way which sees us further perpetuate the inhibition of human development, of our individual development. Yet once we do allow our pain to transform us, notice that we're not the agency of this transformation. We're not doing it, it is being done to us. Once we are transformed by our pain, once we realise and move through and embody the idea that the only way out is through, and any avoidance, and we avoid things by fixing, by carefully comforting ourselves with the opiates of television, with the opiates of shopping, with the opiates of changing our external circumstances in order to bring about a different feeling on the inside or a different set of external circumstances, so our internal experience is sufficiently happy, though you can hear in that we haven't been transformed by the experience. We've suppressed it, or we've neatly bracketed it and pushed it to the side, so that we haven't been taught by the necessary suffering, by the upside-down economy of grace that pours out through difficulty, often tragedy. And don't we see in our world that people are often motivated to change, by change, for change, or from change, by the necessary and difficult circumstances we go through. How many safety measures have been put into our communities as a result of terrible incidents and accidents that have caused death and suffering in families and extended families and friendships and wider peer groups? Change arises out of the emptiness of nature and the way of things. How can anything new appear when something is so full up of what it is, whilst we're so full up of control and clamours for safety and security and happiness and the pursuit of pleasure? How can anything new get into someone so cathected or addicted to positive feelings, positive attitudes, and the temporary pockets of joy and ecstasy and laughter? And how can we fully experience those and love those and enjoy those when they're present without knowing what appears to at first seem the dualistic opposite? Of course, there is seeming duality in the absoluteness of things, as there always is. And here, suffering and happiness are two eyes on the same face of the one reality. Reality being the most joyful and resplendent descent into the void of living, in order to rise up out into the joy of all living that we have here. So suffering, as do all things, belong to something good. In the relative sense, suffering is necessary, and suffering is an upside-down economy. Even the symbolism of the cross in Christian mysticism is that of an archetype, the Godhead, that embodies and signifies the universal understanding of love that walked a human walk in order to fully show people that had lost their way, or to be an embodiment of love in a world that is attached and cathected to the necessary experience of life. An archetype of great love nailed to a symbol, a Roman torture weapon, the crucifix. So great love and great suffering are embodied and known by reality. They are inevitable and essential components of life as we experience it. That the symbology of that is that they do necessarily come together, but it is that crucificial point where the cross crosses over, where we meet, where the balance is found. It is the yin and the yang. It is the reconciliation of opposites of love and suffering, of dark and of night, of winter and of summer, and of autumn and of spring, and of female and masculine, and of my two dancing hands that keep talking as this centeredness, out of which the capacity to move forward, out of which transformation has occurred, out of which my own experiences and the dallying dance between suffering and joy. And I suffer really badly. When I suffer, I abandon myself to it. There's no complicated or positive grief when I'm in a grief experience, and all suffering is grief. It is the letting go of the collapse of the program, of how we thought life was currently going, or how we hoped it would be going in quite soon. We were moving along a path, and suffering appears, the loss of the program of how that was supposed to look happens. And there we are, we turn left, a different direction in life, as we are given the opportunity to see that, the ways in which and how deeply we're not doing it. It is being done to us. The gift that we get in that with life is that we are able to know, see and experience out of our portion of how the relative world looks. We're able to watch the show. And to be a watcher is to watch from a place of reconciliation and wholeness and awakening or recognition, or just to be content and find our happiness in our own bodies and from our own unique seeming perspective. And once we reconcile these opposites, and once suffering and happiness are married, then we live wholly and fully and freely as that which appears to us here as me, as I, is embodied and is full, and we're able to look and see and say, yes, come, whether it's joy or whether it's a need to persevere or be resilient or be tenacious at a time when we are going through the badlands of experience, where we are fighting the thorns of the way and the dragons of the way in order to reach the turret and liberate the energy trapped within the turret, and to take the lesson from the season that we've just been travelling through. This is perhaps to do life well and to really know riches beyond mere material means. I am empty.